Previously on our story, Akelo found a purpose in life and she was accepted by the village, and the chief called her to educate the villagers on how to respect and be kind to each other. And we're diving into our part 4 of the story, so let us dive into it. The days that followed were filled with change, and although Akelo was proud of the process, she knew there was still more work to be done. The villagers had started listening to her, but the deep-rooted beliefs they held would take time to break. Akelo's heart was full of hope, but she also knew that patience was the key. As the sun rose one bright morning, the village felt different. The children who had once whispered behind Akelo's back now played with her in the village square. They no longer saw her skin as something to be feared. Instead, they saw her as a kind woman with a big heart. Someone who had healed them when they were sick, someone they could trust. One afternoon, the chief called a village meeting. This was something Akelo had never seen before. He was calling a gathering to discuss change, not just for health, but for the way of life. Akelo stood beside Laban as the villagers filled the square, their faces full of curiosity and hope. "Everyone gather around," the chief said, his voice strong and filled with purpose. "We are here today because we have something important to discuss. Akelo has helped us heal the sickness, but she also opened our eyes to something much bigger, the importance of kindness and understanding." The chief paused, looking at Akelo with gratitude. "We have wronged her. We have treated her differently because of her skin, and for that, we are deeply sorry. But today, we make a promise to change. We will no longer judge others for their appearance. We will teach our children the value of kindness, respect, and acceptance. From now on, we will be a village where everyone belongs, no matter who they are." Akelo felt tears well up in her eyes as the villagers clapped in agreement. This was the moment she had dreamed of, but it was even better than she had ever imagined. The village was finally willing to embrace what she had been teaching them all along. "I accept your apology," Akelo said, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "But words are only the first step. I want to see this village continue to grow, to become a place where we don't just talk about kindness, but live it every day." The chief nodded. We will show you our change, Akelo. We are ready." As the meeting ended, Akelo looked around the villagers, some of whom had once rejected her, now standing together, united in a new sense of purpose. The children ran through the village, laughing, their voice filled with joy. It was a small but powerful reminder that things were changing, and that Akelo had made a real difference. Later that evening, as Akelo and Laban walked through the village, hand in hand, they shared a quiet moment of peace. The village was no longer a place of rejection for Akelo. It had become her home, a place where she had once been seen as a curse, but now seen as a teacher, a healer, and beloved member of a community. "This is what you've done, Akelo," Laban said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've changed everything. You've made this village see what you truly are." Akelo smiled, her heart full. "We've done it together, Laban, and this is only the beginning. There's still so much more we can do." But as Akelo looked out over the village, she knew deep down that the hardest part was over. The villagers had opened their hearts to change, and though the journey ahead would have its challenges, Akelo believed that this new way of life would continue to grow. It was a new beginning for her, for the village, and for everyone who called it home. And as the stars shone brightly above them, Akelo felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that the world would change, one small step at a time. Weeks passed, and the village began to feel more united. The changes were small but meaningful. Villagers who had once avoided Akelo now greeted her with a smile. Children came to her for advice and healing, and even the elders who had once doubted her began to trust her wisdom. Akelo felt like a village was finally becoming the place she had always hoped for, a place where kindness and understanding ruled, not fear and judgment. One day, as Akelo was gathering herbs by the river, she saw a familiar face in a distance. It was a stranger, someone she hadn't seen in months. It was the man who had come to the village when she was still treated as an outcast. His name was Tade, and he had fallen in love with her despite the way the villagers had treated her. Tade had left the village suddenly one day without a word, and Akelo had wondered what had happened to him. Had he forgotten her? Had he moved on to someone else like the rest of the men in the village had? Her heart had inched when he left, but she had never allowed herself to dwell on it. She had a mission to complete. She hadn't allowed herself to be distracted by someone who had been just fleeting a moment in her life. But now, here he was, walking towards her with a smile on his face. "Akelo," he called softly, his voice full of warmth. "I've missed you." Akelo stood still for a moment, unsure of what to say. She didn't expect to see him again, and suddenly, a rush of emotion left her speechless. After all the process she had made in the village, she didn't know where she stood with him. Tade stepped closer, his eyes full of sincerity. "I've been away for a while, but I've thought about you every day. When I left, I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted, but now I do. I want to be with you, Akelo. I don't care about the village's opinion. I see you and I want you." Akelo looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Could it be true? Was he really saying what she thought he was saying? She had spent so long proving herself to the villagers, but now she wondered if it was her own heart that needed to be healed. "Why did you leave?" she asked softly, her voice filled with both curiosity and pain. Tade lowered his gaze for a moment, then met her eyes again. "I left because I was scared. Scared of what others would say. Scared of what it meant to love you in a place like this. But now I know that I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care about you." Akelo felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It wasn't just about the village's acceptance anymore. It was about her own journey, her own healing. She had spent so long doubting herself because of how others treated her. But now, with Tade's words, she realized she didn't need anyone's approval. She was enough just as she was. "I don't want to be afraid anymore, Tade," Akelo said, her voice stronger now. "I don't want to live in the shadow of other people's opinions. I want to live for myself, for what I feel right in my heart." Tade smiled, and in that smile, Akelo saw the same love and acceptance she had always longed for. "Then let's build something new together," he said. "Not just for us, but for the village. A new future, where no one has to feel ashamed of who they are." Akelo smiled back, her heart lighter than it had ever been. For so long, she had carried the weight of the village's rejection on her shoulders. But now, standing with Tade, she felt free. She felt ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that the village was changing and that she was no longer alone. The next few days were filled with talks about future, not just for Akelo and Tade, but for the entire village. Akelo knew that her work was far from over, but for the first time, she felt like it was possible to build a future where everyone could feel accepted and loved. And as Tade and Akelo walked hand in hand through the village, the people greeted them with nods and smiles. The change that started with one person's kindness was now spreading throughout the entire village. The villagers were learning to love not just for each other but themselves. In that moment, Akelo realized that her journey had only just begun. She had healed the village's sickness, but now it was time to heal the heart of the people. And with Tade by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenge laid ahead. As the days passed, the village continued to change in a way that Akelo had once thought impossible. What had started as a small spark of hope had now turned into a blazing fire of transformation. The villagers who had once whispered behind Akelo's back now sought her advice and guidance. The children who had once been told to stay away from her now running to her with excitement, eager to learn from her. Akelo could feel the warmth of the village growing. The walls of prejudice that once surrounded it were slowly coming down brick by brick. The villagers were beginning to understand what it meant to truly accept each other no matter their differences. Akelo's heart thrilled with pride as she watched children playing together regardless of their skin color, regardless of their background or their family history. It was a dream come true. But even as the village healed, there were moments when Akelo couldn't ignore the deep scars that remained. There were still those who whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. There were still those who didn't fully understand the change they were making. And even though Akelo had found a new sense of peace, she couldn't forget the years of hurt and loneliness that had shaped her. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Akelo sat by the river, staring in the distance. Tade had gone to speak with the village elders about starting a new initiative for the community. But Akelo had asked for some time alone. She needed to think. Do you ever feel like you're still carrying the weight of everything when things are better? Akelo asked herself quietly. The breeze brushed her hair gently, and she closed her eyes, listening to the sound of the river. In many ways, she had found peace, but in other ways, she knew that the work was far from over. The journey of healing was a long one, and while the village had made incredible strides, Akelo also knew that deep change took time. Just then, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw Laban walking towards her. He smiled softly as he approached, sitting beside her by the river. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his eyes filled with concern. Akelo nodded, though a small part of her felt conflicted. I'm okay, but sometimes I wonder if the scars will ever fully heal. I feel like we've made so much progress, but there are still days when the past comes back rushing. The whispers, the rejection, it's hard to forget." Laban sighed, his voice filled with understanding. "I can't pretend to know how it feels, but I do know this. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's like a seed planted in soil. At first, it's just a small sprout, and it takes time for it to grow into something beautiful and strong. You've planted that seed here, Akelo, and I believe it will continue to grow, even when it feels hard." Akelo smiled faintly, grateful for his words. "I hope you're right." Laban placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than most people could ever dream of. You've changed the lives of the people here, and you've changed your own life. You've proven that kindness can heal even the deepest wounds." Akelo looked out the river, taking a deep breath. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be challenges, and there would still be people who couldn't see past the surface. But with time, things would continue to change, and she would be there every step of the way, just as always she has been. As the days went on, Akelo and Tade worked together to bring even more positive changes to the village. They started a community garden where everyone could come together to grow food, regardless of their background. They taught the children how to treat everyone with respect and kindness. They worked with the elders to create space for healing, where people could share their struggles without fear of judgment. The village was becoming a place of true unity, where people no longer saw differences as reasons for division, but as opportunities for connection. Akello felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that the seeds she had planted were beginning to bloom. But just as things seemed to be settling, a new challenge appeared. A distant relative of one of the villagers returned, bringing with him old beliefs that contradicted with the new changes Akello had worked so hard for. This man named Okoro was well respected in the neighboring villages, and he carried with him the authority of the old traditions. As he entered the village, Akello's heart sank. Okoro was a powerful man, and if he didn't understand the changes happening in the village, it would set everything back. Tade turned to Akello, his expression serious. "We need to be careful. Okoro may not be open to the changes we've made. He might bring trouble." Akello nodded, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. The journey wasn't over yet. The next day, the village gathered to meet Okoro. Akello felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She had worked too hard to let this man undo everything she had built. She had to stand strong for herself, for Tade, and for the village. "Welcome, Okoro," the chief said, his voice filled with respect. "We are happy to have you here, but we must also ask you to respect the changes we've made in the village." Okoro's eyes narrowed as he looked around. "I've heard so much about this village," he said slowly, "and I must say I'm concerned. A village that abandons its tradition is a village in danger. You've allowed your hearts to be swayed by strange ideas. I fear this will lead to chaos." Akello stepped forward, her heart racing but her voice steady. "Okoro, we respect our traditions, but we must also open our hearts to change. What we've done here is not a rejection of the past, but a step forward, a step towards love, kindness, and understanding. I will not allow fear to dictate the future of this village." The tension in the air was thick as Okoro studied her. For a moment, Akello thought he might dismiss her words. But then, something shifted in his eyes. Slowly, he nodded. Perhaps, you are right. But remember, the past is always watching us. Never forget where you came from." Akello took a deep breath, her resolve stronger than ever. "I will never forget." As Okoro left the village that day, Akello felt a renewed sense of determination. She knew that the road ahead would not always be smooth. There would always be challenges, always be obstacles, but she also knew that with love and unity, anything was possible. And with that, she stepped forward into the future, ready to face whatever came next. The days following Okoro's visit were tense. Whispers filled the village once more, but this time they were different. People weren't questioning Akello's presence. They were questioning whether the village had made the right choice. Many of the elders, while still supporting Akello, were beginning to fear that change she had brought might be too much. Too soon, Okoro's words had planted seeds of doubt, and Akello knew that unless she acted quickly, those seeds would grow into something far more dangerous than any of them expected. Akello couldn't shake the feeling that the next few days would determine the fate of everything she had worked so hard for. She felt the weight of the village's future resting on her shoulders. It was about the children who were learning to accept one another. It was about the women who were finding their voices, and the men who were slowly learning that kindness didn't make them weak. Akello sat in her small house at night, staring at the stars. She had always found comfort in the night skies, in the way it stretches far beyond the reach of her worries. But tonight, the stars seemed distant. as if they were telling her that time for change had come, and she had to see it through. Tade arrived at her door later that evening. His expression was troubled, but his eyes were full of support. "I spoke to the elders," he began, sitting beside her. "They worried. Some of them want to take a step back and return to the old ways. They fear they've already gone too far." Akelo sighed. She had known this day would come. "I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. What do we do now?" Tade reached her hand, his grip steady and comforting. "We stand firm. We should show them the strength of what we've built. You've already changed so much, Akelo. You've already proven that kindness and love can break down the walls of fear. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Akelo looked into his eyes, feeling the sincerity in his words. She knew he was right. The village had already come so far, and if she backed down now, all the progress they had made would be undone. The next morning, Akelo called for a village meeting. Word spread quickly, and soon everyone gathered in the central square. The air was thick, and the villagers whispered among themselves, wondering what would happen next. When Akelo stepped forward, the crowd felt silent. Her heart raced, but she held her head high. "I know there are some of you who are unsure about the change we've made," Akelo began, her voice strong and unwavering. "I understand your fears. Change is never easy, but we cannot let fear control us. We cannot let the past hold us back from the future we deserve." This is the end of our part 4, guys, and see you in our next part. I love you all.